Confederate. The Confederate flag, originating during the American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, represented the Confederate States of America, a coalition of Southern states that seceded primarily to preserve slavery. Over time, the flag has been adopted by various groups as a symbol of white supremacy and segregation, particularly during the civil rights movement in the 20th century. Its display is considered deeply offensive, especially to African Americans, because it glorifies a regime built on racial oppression. Many U.S. states and institutions have banned it from government buildings, schools, and public events, citing its association with hate, intimidation, and historical injustice. Nazi. Few flags in history are as heavily restricted as the Nazi flag. Featuring a black swastika inside a white circle on a red background, it became the central symbol of Adolf Hitler's regime during World War II. The flag is banned in countries such as Germany and Austria under laws that prohibit Nazi symbols, intended to prevent the promotion of fascism and hate speech. Public display can result in fines or imprisonment. Exceptions are allowed in contexts such as historical education, art, or research. Survivors of the Holocaust and communities affected by fascist violence are most directly protected by this ban. Rising Sun. The Rising Sun flag, marked by a red circle with radiating rays, was used by Imperial Japan during its military expansion in the early 20th century and World War II. While still employed by Japan's self-defense forces, many countries, especially in East and Southeast Asia, view it as a symbol of imperial aggression, war crimes, and occupation. In South Korea and China, the flag is equated with the swastika due to its association with atrocities committed by Japan. Sporting events, schools, and international gatherings have banned its display to avoid inflaming tensions. The affected groups are nations and communities that suffered under Japanese rule. ISIS. The black flag used by ISIS, often called the Jihadist flag, bears white Arabic inscriptions and a circular emblem. It spread globally as the group's symbol during its campaigns in Iraq and Syria, representing extremist ideology and violent jihad. Many countries have outlawed the flag under anti-terrorism laws, equating its public display with support for terrorism. Platforms like Facebook and YouTube also remove it to block extremist propaganda. The ban primarily impacts militant supporters, but it also extends to individuals unintentionally displaying it. Communities targeted by ISIS, including Yazidis, Christians, and Muslims opposing extremism, are the ones shielded from its spread. Hamas. The green flags associated with Hamas, a Palestinian Islamist group, feature Quranic verses or the Shahada in white Arabic script. These flags are restricted in several countries, including Germany and the United Kingdom, where Hamas is designated a terrorist organization. The bans stem from fears that public display could promote extremism or incite violence, particularly during protests. The restrictions are not aimed at Islam or Palestinian identity, but at the political and militant activities tied to Hamas. The groups most affected are pro-Palestinian demonstrators and organizations in countries where Hamas is outlawed, as possession or display can carry legal penalties. Antifa. The Antifa flag, usually black and red with two overlapping banners, is linked to far-left militant groups opposing fascism. While not universally banned, some countries and U.S. states have restricted its use during protests where violence has occurred. Authorities argue the symbol can be associated with anarchist violence, property destruction, and riots. In Germany, where the movement originated, the flag is heavily monitored, and groups using it may face police crackdowns. Social media platforms also take down content featuring it when tied to calls for violence. The primary groups affected are activist organizations displaying the flag in demonstrations. Pride. The Rainbow Pride flag, symbolizing LGBTQ+ rights, has faced bans in several conservative and authoritarian countries. Governments that oppose recognition of LGBTQ+ identities often prohibit the flag's display in schools, public events, or government buildings, claiming it promotes values contrary to national or religious traditions. For example, countries in the Middle East, parts of Eastern Europe, and Africa have outlawed it outright. In some cases, people have been arrested simply for possessing rainbow-colored items. The groups most directly affected are LGBTQ+ communities and their allies, who lose a powerful public symbol of visibility, solidarity, and resistance against discrimination. Israel. The national flag of Israel, featuring a blue Star of David between two horizontal blue stripes, has been banned in certain countries that do not recognize Israel or maintain hostile relations with it. In places like Iran, Lebanon, and some Gulf states, public display of the flag is prohibited as part of broader political opposition to Israel's policies and existence. At international sporting events and protests, the flag has sometimes been removed to avoid diplomatic tension or unrest. The groups most affected are Israeli citizens, Jewish communities, and supporters of Israel who cannot display their national identity in those regions. Soviet. The Soviet Union's flag, red with a gold hammer and sickle topped by a star, has been banned or restricted in several post-Soviet and Eastern European countries. Nations such as Latvia, Lithuania, Ukraine, and Poland prohibit it due to its association with communist repression, forced deportations, and political violence. Laws in these states place the hammer and sickle on the same level as the swastika, banning both as totalitarian symbols. The restriction applies in public demonstrations, merchandise, and political events. The groups most affected are communist parties and activists who attempt to use Soviet imagery in political or cultural expression. Kim Il-sung. North Korea's national flag and related symbols, featuring Kim Il-sung and the ruling Kim family, are tightly controlled within the country, but banned elsewhere in some contexts due to sanctions and anti-propaganda laws. The flag itself, with a red star on a white and blue field, is associated with the North Korean regime, authoritarian control, and human rights abuses. Countries and organizations that oppose North Korea's policies may prohibit its display in political events, demonstrations, or media. The ban primarily affects pro-North Korean activists, international supporters, and individuals who attempt to display or distribute these symbols outside North Korea. Taliban. The Taliban flag, typically white with black Arabic script stating the Shahada, represents the Islamist militant group that has controlled Afghanistan at various times. After the Taliban takeover in 2021, several countries and international organizations restricted its display, particularly in contexts that could signal support for the regime or its ideology. The ban is rooted in the group's history of human rights abuses, suppression of women's rights, and sponsorship of terrorism. Public display, sale, or promotion of the flag in countries like the United States and parts of Europe can be subject to legal scrutiny. The restrictions primarily affect Taliban sympathizers and propagandists. Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda's black flag, often featuring white Arabic script and a circular emblem, is globally recognized as a symbol of terrorism. Many countries, including the United States, the United Kingdom, and European Union members, have banned its display under anti-terrorism and hate speech laws. The flag's use is considered promotion of extremist ideology, recruitment, or support for terrorist activities. Displaying it publicly, online, or in merchandise can result in prosecution. The ban primarily impacts members, supporters, and sympathizers of Al-Qaeda, while also protecting communities and countries from potential radicalization, recruitment, and acts of terrorism associated with the organization. Jihadist. Various jihadist flags, often black with white inscriptions of Islamic declarations, are banned in multiple countries because they are linked to terrorist organizations beyond ISIS and Al-Qaeda, including groups like Boko Haram and the Taliban's earlier iterations. Governments restrict these flags to prevent the promotion of violent extremism, recruitment, and propaganda. The symbols are monitored closely online, and their public display can lead to arrest or fines. The bans focus on preventing radicalization and protecting citizens, particularly vulnerable communities targeted by these groups. Individuals displaying these flags, whether knowingly or unknowingly, are directly affected by legal penalties. Neo-Nazi. Neo-Nazi flags often mimic or modify the original Nazi swastika flag and are banned in many countries, including Germany, Austria, and France. The bans target symbols associated with neo-Nazi ideology, which promotes white supremacy, anti-Semitism, and violent extremism. Displaying these flags publicly, even in protests or online, can result in criminal charges, fines, or imprisonment. Schools, public institutions, and social media platforms enforce these restrictions to prevent the spread of hate speech and radicalization. The groups most affected are neo-Nazi organizations and individuals attempting to glorify fascist ideology, while broader society benefits from reduced exposure to extremist propaganda. Rhodesia. The flag of Rhodesia, used during the country's unrecognized existence from 1965 to 1979, featured the Union Jack in the canton and a green and white field with the coat of arms. After the end of white minority rule and the country's transition to Zimbabwe, the flag became banned due to its association with colonialism, racial segregation, and minority rule. Display of the flag is restricted in Zimbabwe and often criticized in other countries as a symbol of racial oppression. The groups most affected are white supremacist or colonial nostalgia organizations, while citizens and communities that suffered under Rhodesian policies are shielded from its promotion. Franco. The flag associated with Francisco Franco's regime in Spain, typically the Spanish tricolor with the eagle of St. John, is restricted under Spain's 2007 historical memory law. The law prohibits public display of symbols that glorify the Franco dictatorship, which ruled from 1939 to 1975, due to its links to political repression, executions, and suppression of civil liberties. Public exhibition can result in fines and removal by authorities. The ban primarily affects far-right groups and individuals seeking to commemorate Franco's rule, while families and communities who suffered under the dictatorship are protected from symbolic promotion of past authoritarianism. From battlefields to political movements, every banned flag carries a legacy of power, conflict, and division. Each restriction reveals how nations respond to symbols that ignite unrest or spread dangerous ideologies. To uncover more about the flags the world has forbidden, subscribe and watch our next video on every banned symbol explained.